Hello everybody, Jonathan Reeves here from Jonathan Reeves CAD, and today we're going to be looking at a new project that I've been working on and how to set this project up from scratch from a blank template. Now you can see some of the project images here. Some of these were done in Twinmotion, I've done some in Enscape as well, and if you see my other tutorials you'll see a bit more on those on the channel. Some really nice visuals and a lovely project. But today it's all about how to get started with new projects and how to set these up in Vectorworks from scratch from blank templates. So we're going to run through this and I hope you enjoy the video. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do when we start a new project is we're just going to load up a default template to begin with. Now for me, I always have my default template as just a totally blank 1 to 50 A3 blank page with no layers, no classes, nothing at all. And the reason I recommend this is what I use to import my files into. So the very first thing I'm going to do is go and find a master map DWG file of the site. I'm going to show you how to set up the contextual plans and site plans. So I'm just going to go through and locate the project folder where we've downloaded the site already. And you can see I've got that stored away in my consultant section. Let's go to surveyors and there it is. So this is just a master map downloaded off the internet of the area. So one thing I really love with Vectorworks is we can just simply drag and drop files to start importing them. And the good thing about drag and drop importing is anything that you can import will import in this way. Things like images and DWGs. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do is change the units here. I've learnt from the past that these master maps come in meters, but generally it's either millimeters or meters, and you can experiment between the two. Let's just see what happens when we bring this in. Now, when you go to advanced settings, you really do want to make sure that you kind of center on import. There's not really too many settings under the conversion, but you can change the scale later on. And here, the classes, it's very important to add a prefix to the imported class DWG names, for example OS hyphen. Also, you may as well purge the drawing after use. So let's click OK. Let's just change that back to meters. I suspect that'll be the correct units. And a final check, everything looking good. We've checked the scale to 1 to 1000 now. Click OK. So what happens is the AutoCAD file will get converted. There's a couple of dialogues that you need to just accept. And this looks good. We've got the information come in for the context of this particular site. Now, before you do anything at all, the most important thing here is just to actually measure one of the grids, for example, and just check that you're actually, imported the correct units. Because if you didn't, there's not a lot of point in carrying on. You may as well start again. So I'm just going to go ahead and have a quick measure and just sort of double check that we're at the right order of scale. So I just click my line tool. Let's draw. That looks like it's the correct scale already. You can immediately tell if it's not. So do shut it down and start again if you get the scale units right. Okay, now the second thing that you'll notice is if I go to my classes, all of the classes are prefixed with OS in front of them. So that was something nice that I did in the import settings. And by the way, if you do forget that and you've already imported the files and you forgot to do the prefixing, a wonderful new command in Vectorworks 2021 is the batch convert command under the tools menu. So you can actually batch convert and add that prefix in later if needed. But it is also good to do it at import stage. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to save this file into the correct project folder. And I like to kind of save that into the job and into my drawings. Obviously this is a untouched kind of survey file of the site. Fantastic. Now I'd kind of like to keep this original file, and before I do anything else, now I actually go and start my project template from my actually JRA 2D template. Now the difference between a project template and a blank template is that the project template can have an awful lot of things loaded in. So for example, in my templates, I'll give you a quick look around. What I've done over the period of time is developed it to basically have as much content in as I need to do a real project apart from the actual drawings themselves. So I hope that makes sense, and you'll see once this loads up. It's just opening up at the moment. It's not that big, it's about 10 megabytes, so not huge. Okay, cool. So it kind of generally opens on this page, which is my graphic standards page. And that's just a nice way to have, standard graphics, things like north points, markers, maybe some text sizes, and a few useful little gadgets like toilets and baths, that sort of stuff. The most important thing though, when you open up my template, you'll see that I've also got a whole bunch of sheet layers and basically design layers already available. So what this means is I don't have to recreate those each time. So all I'm doing now is going to my imported file. I'm clicking on the central point there, that center origin point, which you can turn on in your preferences. And I'm basically clicking paste. And when I kind of paste in the drawing, it will kind of land in that central position. So now I can adjust the scale, and I can just make sure that I'm happy at 1 to 1250 as a nice scale. I like to kind of completely center the import before I start designing. Now this is something that I do, but if you do need to preserve geographical origins for larger projects, obviously this isn't the correct way to do it. You need to maintain the imported origin, not recenter the drawing. But for small residential projects, this doesn't really matter. Okay, so the next thing that I normally do after importing the OS base is I like to create figured ground drawings just to make them a bit more legible and clear. So what I'm going to go and do here is make a new class called OS-buildings fill. So it fits in with the typology of the OS classes. I'm going to set the graphics of that just to be, just an average grey, and turn off the pen, I think, as well. Okay, fine. So we'll click OK. Now you'll notice that on the polygon tool is a very important mode of the polygon tool, the create from inner boundary mode. So I'm going to go and set that to be the active class, my building fill class, OS building fill, there it is. And basically all I need to do is with one click, when I click into a boundary, it finds the shape. You'll see that it did it in 2 sections. So what I did, I actually held shift down. Okay, in order to sort this, I'm actually going to turn off this invisible grid. Also, quite important, put yourself a shape in, turn off the fill, just so that you basically have a boundary. Because when you use the inner boundary tool, it does like to sense a boundary, and if some of the shapes are actually open, then it can possibly take quite a long time to find those shapes. But the good thing with having a boundary then, it kind of sets the limits. So you can see it's a very rapid process. We basically just whiz around, clicking inside the building shapes to fill those in, and this creates a really nice sort of effect of a figure ground drawing. So it doesn't quite take long at all. It's actually very satisfying work. And if you hold shift down, as I say, it adds the first shape to the next shape. So we're just kind of almost finished on this little contextual plan. So I really like figure ground drawings. They're just much more legible than normal kind of black and white drawings as it was before. They only take a few minutes to do, and you can see we're almost there. And a bit later, I'll be extruding these shapes into 3D to create a little bit of a kind of basic massing model. Fantastic. Okay, so I think we're pretty much there. We've found all of the main sort of building outlines. So now what I'm actually going to do is go and create another class, and let's make this for, what should we do? Yeah, let's go ahead and do the roads next. That's the most sort of important major element of this particular site, I guess, for the context. I'm going to go ahead and set a slightly different fill color for the roads, maybe something a little bit lighter. Yeah, that's a good one. We can always change it later. Click OK. And you can see these kind of complicated road shapes. Imagine if you were trying to trace around these with the traditional polygon tool. It'd take you loads of different clicks. But with this wonderful technique of the inner boundary mode, you just hold shift down. Every time you click, it basically adds the last shape to the next one. And literally within a few clicks, I've generated that whole road shape as one big thing. Don't worry, if you didn't actually hold shift down there, you can always select them both and add surface. Okay, so let's go ahead and do some pavements as well. I think we'll just pop into our classes and let's have a quick look at this. Let's go and create a new class this way through the dialog this time, just to show you. It's a little bit slower doing it this way. You have to go into the dialog and out of the dialog, but I know a lot of people like to do this using that organizational palette, if you like. So this is kind of nice. Let's just do that. Click OK when we're ready. In fact, we'll just always remember to use at creation. If you don't do that, it doesn't always use the color of the graphics you're setting. So that's very important, the fact you use the graphics as you create the object. Okay, brilliant. So I think we're pretty happy. Just going to kind of tweak those classes. Let's click OK. And off we go. Click into that shape, create the pavements. Job done. Really, really fast. Okay, so what's next? I think we'll just kind of finish off these other little pavement areas here. And basically, I think the next thing we'll probably go and work on is maybe the site boundary. So let's have a little look at how we do this. I'm going to do a bit of tidying up, by the way, just sort of move some of these text icons in. Let's rotate that round. Seems a bit of kind of a better way to orientate it. And if I go back and actually do turn the grid back on for a second, so that's in that class there, let's just turn that on. What I'm looking to do is extract a few things from the grid, particularly the scale bar actually. So I'm going to get those elements there. Let's just move them to a new class. Just for now, we'll put them in another class called OS-scale bar, etc. And the reason I want to do that is because I want to turn the grid off, but I would like to leave the scale bar visible. So now they're in separate classes. I can use my wonderful visibility tool to zap the grid, turn that one off, and I can leave the scale bar, which is obviously essential for OS bases. And as remember, don't forget to keep the copyright sign. It's quite an important element. Okay, that's looking good. So I normally kind of take the scale bar and group it just for convenience, and potentially move it where I'm looking to kind of center it up there, just to make it a little bit neater on the drawing. Okay, that's looking really, really good. So I think what we'll do next is we'll go down to create a viewport. Okay, so this is my first viewport in this project. I've only been working for a few minutes, I think 10 minutes or so. I'm going to go and create a viewport onto one of my sheets. In fact, just before we do that, I'm going to create a site boundary. Okay, so let's go for one more class. Let's call this OS-site boundary. May as well do this before we do the viewport. Let's colour that with no fill, I think, and a nice big red outline, as is traditional for your site boundaries. Let's go for this nice bright red here, and beef it up a bit as well, just so it's really clear on the drawing, probably 0.5 pen weight. With a single click, you can see we've got the site there. Just move that into that OS class, and then that will take on the attributes. Fantastic. Again, we'll be able to turn that on and off and vary it as we need. Excellent. Okay, so I think we're ready. That's also within the site, that little area there. Okay, so let's go for it now. Let's go view, create our first viewport for the project, create viewport. And the great thing is, because we're using our project template, we've already got pretty much all the drawings we need for a planning application available. And the nice thing is they're all titled up with a north point on and ready to rock and roll. Now, all I really need to do here is edit the name of the title block, which we'll do in a second. But before I do that, I'm just going to copy and paste in place the 1:1250 location plan. And this is easy as this really. I just simply blow it up to 1:500, double click to get into the crop mode. So it's double click and go into crop mode. Just place a crop just by drawing a shape. Any shape will do, but obviously a rectangle is appropriate in this circumstance. Give it as big a crop as you can. Exit the viewport, and let's just recenter that viewport on the drawing. So to do that, little trick is to go to the object info and actually click on the center point of the anchor points, if you like, and just type in 0, 0 for the X and Y coordinates. That sort of centers them up there. So I'll just double click into the crop one more time. Actually, you know what? Let's just move it across and drag it down, and let's just tab in, I don't know, say 5 or 10 mil, just so it's nice and neat. Okay, just to adjust that little crop, I double click, and then I'll be able to kind of avoid clashing with my title block. So you can see, you know, cropping viewports in Vectorworks, super easy, very flexible. We just kind of snap slightly inside of that title block there. I think that's good. And of course, we do still need the scale bar. Okay, so the best way to achieve this is simply duplicate the viewport slightly. Okay, let's kind of scroll down. Go to advanced properties first though. And let's just, before we do anything, let's scale down the text size, because it's looking a bit big because we've scaled the viewport up. It's another really nice aspect of Vectorworks viewports. You can just scale things like text and hatching in there. Okay, that's good. Let's go on to the next drawing. So the next drawing is the site plan. So we'll just paste in that site. And now, of course, we can do the scale to 1:200. It's going to get pretty large, so we need to double click, edit our crop a bit tighter. But hopefully you're beginning to see that one drawing is flowing to the next drawing. It's very rapid, and I can snap that to the outer boundary of the sheet. And let's have a little look, see how that works. Yeah, I'm holding B down, by the way, just so I can see the sheet below the fill of the paper. That puts me into what they call X-ray mode. So let's do that. I think we'll go full width. And what I'm going to need to do clearly with this particular site, because it's quite a large site, is I think going to need to rotate it round. So now I've got the format right, let's rotate the viewport crop. And then when I exit the crop, I should be able to just tweak that position. Yeah, it's looking good. And then what we'll do is we'll just rotate the viewport on this particular sheet. So this won't be true north. Okay, so let's just do Command L a couple of times. Let's rotate it around to what feels like a natural orientation for the site. And let's center back. Cool. Now, don't forget, of course, you've got to rotate your north point appropriately. So we'll kind of get on to do that a bit later. Another little trick here is sometimes I don't really want to crop that viewport anymore. So I can actually, well, let's just take it up a little bit to the outer extent of the sheet. So what I can actually do is just mask it by putting a white rectangle behind the title block. I'll just click 4, draw a rectangle behind the title block. Let's just change the color of that fill. Let's put it in the none class. Just watch your classes when you're creating things like viewports. So put it into there, Command B, send to the back, and then click on the viewport itself and send that to the back. So that means you don't get any kind of lines underneath the title block, as it were. That looks a lot nicer. Okay, good. So apart from rotating that north point and adding a scale bar, that sheet is almost done. So probably about time we saved the drawing. We've made a bit of progress. Save it into the project folder. But you can see how rapidly in 15 minutes we've actually created 3 of our key drawings: the location plan, the block plan, and the site plan. Well, not the proposed site plan, but the existing site plan. Fantastic. Okay, so the next thing we're going to work on is the title block. You can see I've got my standard title block in the template, but it needs a little bit of updating actually. I've done a couple of things. I've changed my logo, and also obviously it's a different project name. That was from a previous project. So I just double click onto the title block. And you can see we're using the smart title block, the Vectorworks introduced back in Vectorworks a couple of years ago, which actually has developed into an extremely powerful tool for doing all your titles and things like drawing issue sheets. And if you're not using this already, if you're just using a straightforward title block, I really recommend you get the smart title block working for you. It's quite straightforward to do, requires a little bit of setting up. Okay, so I'm just going through, typing in the project data. The good thing with project data is that goes through all the title blocks in the sheet clearly, because it's project-based name data, things like the client name, the site, and so on as well. When we come on to the sheet data, then that's obviously localized depending on the project drawing and the title of that drawing and the number of the drawing. Good. Okay, so we finished editing the title block, and the good thing is all of the title blocks in the drawing will now be updated. Okay, so the next thing I normally like to do is actually just add in a front cover for my project. Sometimes I use a photo of the site. Sometimes I just pop in. For this one, I think it's really appropriate just to have like an aerial image, which really kind of shows the context of the site. And, the fact that this is kind of like an infill site really in some ways between some other existing developments, even though it is a fairly greenfield site. So basically I'm going to drag and drop in a screenshot that I've taken from Google or any other mapping program. Probably Apple Maps is another one that I use quite a lot. And basically I can drag that in. It's going to come in pretty large. Grab the corner. Let's kind of squash it down. Hold shift down when you constrain it, just so you can kind of get it into the position you need. Let's just kind of squash that across to there. Fantastic. Not quite going to crop. Yeah, that's it. That's perfect. And then if you double click it, you can actually crop it as well. So just like you can crop PDFs and viewports, if you double click onto the image, we'll be able to crop it by drawing in a rectangle, the size we would like that crop to be. So I'm just going to measure a tiny bit where I want that to be. I'm going to move that up and actually crop it from the top, I've decided. So let's double click one more time, get a rectangle tool, pop it around the area of the image that we're interested in cropping, and just exit. You can see very, very straightforward. So now that I can see my text there, I can kind of go through and title this section up as well. Type in the date and the project name and so on, the stage of the project. Okay, good. So it's just in a way, I find all this kind of work fairly sort of mindless in some ways. It's not taxing design-wise. It's one of those activities that just prepares you and gets you kind of thinking at low level about the project, almost on the back burner, you start to kind of begin to generate ideas and feelings and thoughts about the site. So I do quite like this preparatory stage. I find it, it's a very rapid way to feel like you've made a bit of progress on a project. And I don't know if you're like me, but the hardest thing about new projects is actually getting started half the time. So if you can kind of start them in a nice, easy, methodical kind of fashion that feels quite satisfying, that's got to be a good thing. And as I say, all the time I'm working on this, I'm probably having sort of absorbing thoughts about the concept and the ideas that I'm thinking about for this particular project. In fact, for this one, we know that, putting in planning for a traditional 2-story house is going to be a difficult one because a number of planning applications had been previously refused. So I've already kind of agreed with the client that I'm going to go for more of an earth-sheltered house concept. You can see I've just typed that very badly. It's not my spelling, it's my typing. But bear in mind, actually, you do have a really nice little feature in Vectorworks called the spell checker as well. So right-click and spell check. And let's just see if we can change that text a little bit there. There we go. Just spotted the spelling mistake. So let's right-click. Let's go down to check spelling. So do remember to run the check spelling if you're like me. I'm okay at spelling. It's my typing that's not that brilliant. I make quite a lot of typos like most architects, I would say. Fantastic. Okay, so I've got a little bit of drop shadow on this text as well, just to kind of bold it out. Looks quite nice. Very straightforward. So doing a front cover, either use a graphic or a sketch or just put an image on there. Okay, so we've made a nice little progress already on the beginning of this project. Let's just review our drawing so far. So there is our location plan. We've got the scale on there, which is fantastic. On this one, if you remember, I didn't have the scale on, so it's easy to sort. All I need to do is duplicate the existing viewport. Let's hold down the Alt key, drag off a copy of that viewport, double click it, just edit the crop and basically move the crop. So move the crop down to so it incorporates the scale bar and nothing else. So that's the way to tackle that little issue. Just bring the rectangle in there, the crop in, a bit tighter. Whoops, that's okay. Zoom in a bit there, just make sure we get all of that text in there. So this is a really good way to make sure you're completely accurate with your scale bars. Sometimes I use my own custom scale bar, but I'm pretty happy with this one. It's pretty straightforward. Let's just snap that up there into the middle of the drawing. Excellent. Okay, that's good. So now we should be able to copy that scale bar to the next sheet and basically paste it in place. Let's have a look. Copy. Let's go to our site plan. Let's paste this in. I think it's going to be pretty big at this scale. So this is possibly where I might want to use one of my custom title blocks instead. But let's just see how big it looks if I change the scale. Probably going to look a bit too huge, to be fair. Yeah, that's a bit silly. So this is where I basically would go and get one of my custom title blocks from my graphic standard sheets and just sort of set that to something a bit more meaningful. Okay, so let's review where we got to. Got my north point. Let's swing that round just to take account of the angle. We know that that was rotated 90 degrees and so on. So always check things like your north points and the scales. I say all of this really important information for developing a design and things like planning applications, and do this initial work, without really, having kind of forced any ideas for the project. So that's obviously the next exciting stage. You do your preparatory work and actually kind of start forming some initial ideas about the design. But we'll probably come on to that in a later video. But if you do look at my other videos on the channel, you'll see where we got to on this project. Some really exciting concepts and visuals. So just to finish off, I'll give you a little teaser of some of the finished visuals for the project. And this was a lovely animation I did using the amazing Twinmotion. And you can see it really brings the project to life. We've got that lovely landscape there, things like the grass and the butterflies. Little lovely touches like the birds moving around and the cat. And also you'll notice that I'm doing a bit of a solar study at the same time, really just showing the sun moving through the day. In the latest Twinmotion, you can have doors opening as you approach them, that kind of thing. And as I say, that lovely sunshine moving through the model as we go. So thanks for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed this first video on this project. And please check out the other tutorials for both Twinmotion and Enscape for this project. Bye bye.